They call it the Island of Broken Souls, a place just 15 minutes from Manhattan. Yet it feels like another world, a world ruled not by law, but by survival. Rikers Island wasn't built for redemption. It was built to disappear people. Over the decades, it's become one of the most violent and chaotic jail complexes in America. Guards and inmates alike whisper stories of abuse, corruption, and death. But behind the headlines, there are darker truths. Secrets buried beneath years of silence, cover-ups, and fear. This is the dark secrets of Rikers Island. Exposed. A place where power turns into cruelty, and where some never make it out alive. Before we begin, make sure you like, share, and subscribe, because what you're about to hear is the side of Rikers Island they don't want you to know. Stretching over 400 acres in the East River, Rikers Island was supposed to be a temporary solution, a holding facility for those awaiting trial or serving short sentences. But what began as a simple jail soon evolved into something far darker, a micro-city of concrete and chaos, with its own rules, its own economy, and its own secrets. Before we dive into the darkness of Rikers Island, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. It helps us keep uncovering the hidden truths they don't want you to see. Because what you're about to witness isn't just another story about prison life. It's a story about power, corruption, and the human spirit trapped behind concrete walls. Welcome to the dark secrets of Rikers Island. Exposed. The island that time forgot. Rikers Island opened in 1932, during a time when New York City wanted to hide its problems. Built on landfill and surrounded by water, it was seen as a perfect place to keep the unwanted far away from the public eye. But isolation breeds neglect, and neglect on Rikers became a way of life. Over time, the island grew into a maze of facilities, from the infamous Anna M. Cross Center to the Otis Banham Correctional Center, where some of the worst violence would erupt. Each building carried its own nickname, its own stories that no one on the outside ever heard until now. To understand what Rikers is, you first need to understand what it became, the power behind the walls. Officially, Rikers is controlled by the Department of Correction. Unofficially, it's run by whoever can instill the most fear. Inside those walls, power isn't written in policy, it's written in pain. Correction officers form alliances with inmates. Contraband moves like currency, and every favor has a price. There's a saying on Rikers: you either play the game or you become the game. From smuggled phones to drugs to violence for hire, everything has a market. And when the system looks away, corruption flourishes in the dark. But even those who think they're in control eventually pay the price. The code of survival. Every inmate who steps onto the island learns one rule fast. You don't show weakness. Because weakness is blood in the water. New arrivals are tested immediately, sometimes within minutes of entering the dorm. Some are robbed. Others are beaten. Many join gangs just to stay alive. In Rikers' world, protection isn't free. It's earned through loyalty and violence. They call it the program. A system where inmates, not guards, decide who eats, who sleeps, and who bleeds. And if you defy the program, you vanish. The officers' war. But it isn't just the inmates who live in fear. Correction officers, underpaid, overworked, and often untrained, face a war of their own. They walk into units with hundreds of men alone, and the line between survival and cruelty starts to blur. Some officers use force to survive, others to dominate. Over the years, Rikers has seen countless reports of excessive violence, broken jaws, fractured ribs, and cover-ups hidden under use of force reports. Narrator: but when everyone's trapped on the same island, justice becomes a ghost story. The death of Kalief Browder. No story exposes the darkness of Rikers more than that of Kalief Browder, a teenager accused of stealing a backpack, who never stood trial. He spent 3 years on Rikers Island, 2 of those years in solitary confinement. He was never convicted, and when he came home, he couldn't escape the shadows that Rikers left behind. Kalief's story sparked outrage, but his case wasn't unique. It was just the first the world saw. Because for every Kalief Browder, there are dozens whose names we'll never know. The hidden economy. Inside Rikers, money doesn't look like money. It looks like cigarettes, ramen noodles, and phone minutes. It looks like favors and silence. Smuggling runs deep, from officers sneaking in contraband for extra cash to inmates running small empires through secret phones. Some make hundreds a week. Others owe debts they can never repay. And debts on Rikers are often settled in blood. The mental war. On Rikers Island, the war isn't always physical. It's mental. For many inmates, the fight happens inside their own heads, in silence, isolation, and despair. Imagine being locked in a tiny cell for 23 hours a day. No sunlight, no fresh air, no voice answering when you call. The only sound, your own breathing and the hum of the lights above you. They call it the Bing, Rikers' nickname for solitary confinement. And inside the Bing, time stops making sense. Some inmates talk to walls. Others scream through the vents just to hear another human voice. Days bleed into nights until you forget what normal feels like. And when the cell door finally opens, the outside world doesn't feel real anymore. A study once revealed that nearly half of all Rikers inmates show symptoms of mental illness. But in here, treatment often looks like punishment. If you act out, you're thrown into isolation. If you break down, you're labeled non-compliant. And when officers are untrained or overwhelmed, the cycle continues. Pain feeding pain. Many never recover. Even after release, they carry Rikers with them. The voices, the fear, the invisible scars. The island doesn't just cage the body, it cages the mind. The cover-up culture. When violence happens on Rikers, and it happens often, reports are written. But what goes into those reports rarely matches what really happened. Incidents are reworded. Camera footage disappears. Officers back each other up, and supervisors look the other way. It's a culture of silence, one that protects itself before it protects justice. For years, whistleblowers have tried to expose what goes on behind those walls. Some officers have risked their careers and their safety to tell the truth. They describe retaliation, threats, and being labeled as rats by their own colleagues. One former correctional captain described it like this: if you speak up, you disappear, not literally, but career-wise. They'll make your life hell until you quit. And with every cover-up, the system rots a little deeper. Files get buried, lives get forgotten, and the island continues to devour its own. The broken promises of reform. For decades, politicians have promised to fix Rikers Island. They've promised new leadership, better conditions, even complete closure. In 2017, the city announced a plan to shut it down by 2027. But years later, Rikers still stands. Each new plan brings hope. Each failure brings heartbreak. Money is poured in, reforms are promised, but little changes where it matters most. Inside the cells, the violence continues, the deaths continue, and Rikers remains what it has always been, a mirror reflecting the cracks of the entire justice system. But beneath the despair, something else grows. Resistance. From former inmates, from families, from advocates who refuse to let the island's ghosts stay buried. The whistleblowers. Every fortress has its cracks. And on Rikers Island, those cracks come from within. Officers, nurses, and even wardens, people once loyal to system, have begun to speak. Not out of rebellion, but out of conscience. One former correctional officer described his breaking point. I watched an inmate bleed out in front of me. We were told not to report it until the shift ended. They said it was for paperwork reasons. But really it was to keep it quiet. These whistleblowers tell of doctor reports, code words for violent incidents, and internal cover-ups so routine they felt normal. If a camera caught too much, it was accidentally erased. If an inmate complained, they were sent to solitary for evaluation. But speaking up comes with a price. Those who talk are often transferred, demoted, or isolated by their peers. Some receive anonymous threats. Others find their careers quietly destroyed. Yet they still speak, because silence is worse. Because somewhere deep down they know you can't reform what you refuse to see. The women of Rikers. While much of the world sees Rikers as a place for men, thousands of women have passed through its gates. Most of them survivors themselves of poverty, abuse, or addiction. And inside those walls, their suffering continues, often in silence. In the Rose M. Singer Center, Rikers Women's Facility, Inmates describe sexual harassment, neglect, and humiliation disguised as discipline. Pregnant women shackled during transport. Mothers forced to give birth alone. Mental health ignored. Grief treated like rebellion. But among the pain, there's resilience. Some of these women become advocates after release, speaking out for those who can't. Their voices cut through the noise, reminding the world that every statistic has a story, and every story has a heartbeat. They're the forgotten voices of Rikers, the ones still fighting to be heard, the ghosts of the island. When people leave Rikers, part of them stays behind. The island clings to you. The noise, the fear, the smell of concrete after rain. It lingers long after the sentence ends. Former inmates describe nightmares of endless corridors, doors that won't open, voices calling from the dark. Some can't sleep. Some can't speak about it at all. Others end up back behind bars, not because they want to, but because the world outside feels foreign. They call it institutionalization. But here, it's something deeper. It's possession. Rikers Island doesn't just hold prisoners. It creates them. And in many ways, it never lets them go. The pressure point. As the scandals pile up, pressure mounts. Human rights groups, families of the dead, city officials, everyone pointing fingers, no one accepting blame. The island has become a symbol, not just of New York's failures, but of America's, a place where justice and cruelty coexist in plain sight, where the word correction has lost its meaning. Yet still, the gates remain locked, the ferries keep running, the cycle continues, until the system changes at its core. There will always be another Rikers, another island, another name, the cover-up unraveled. For decades, Rikers Island hid its secrets behind paperwork, silence, and fear. But even the strongest walls crack, especially when the truth starts to leak. Investigators began to dig, not journalists at first, but people inside the system itself. Medical staff who saw the negligence. Data clerks who noticed missing reports. And one man who refused to delete a video. Footage that showed what officials said never happened. That footage revealed a truth impossible to deny. An inmate beaten while restrained, while multiple officers stood by. It was the moment the illusion shattered. And once it did, others followed. Files resurfaced. Whistleblowers came forward. The department could no longer claim ignorance. City Hall scrambled. Suddenly, there were task forces, reform committees, new oversight panels. But none of it could erase the decades of rot that had already seeped through the island's foundation. The cover-ups didn't just hide violence. They protected careers, contracts, and political images. Rikers wasn't just a jail. It was a business. And too many people were profiting from keeping it alive. The investigators. When federal investigators finally stepped in, they found more than anyone was prepared to admit. They uncovered falsified reports, hidden injury logs, and patterns of abuse so widespread it was impossible to call them isolated incidents. Officers once thought untouchable were suddenly facing charges. Supervisors were reassigned, and the city was forced to confront the truth in public hearings. It was all there in black and white. But for the families who'd lost loved ones behind those walls, paperwork wasn't justice. They wanted accountability. They wanted names. And they wanted closure. Instead, they got apologies and promises that Rikers would be reformed, that new leadership would change the culture, that the past would never repeat itself. But to those who lived it, those words rang hollow. The reckoning came slowly, not as a sudden collapse, but as a realization. Rikers couldn't be reformed. It was built on punishment, not rehabilitation, on control, not care. It wasn't broken. It was designed this way. Activists demanded closure. The city promised a new plan, smaller, borough-based jails, community reinvestment, mental health programs. But beneath the optimism, there was resistance. Unions fought to keep the jobs. Developers eyed the land. Politicians wavered between morality and votes. And as debates raged on, Rikers continued to claim lives. More deaths, more scandals, more names on a growing list of the forgotten. Sometimes a place becomes too haunted to save. Sometimes the only justice is to tear it down. The last day inside. For those who spent years on Rikers, the last day feels unreal. You've imagined walking out so many times, yet when the door opens, it doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like confusion. Some carry nothing but a brown paper bag and a Metro card. Others leave with medication, trauma, and no home to return to. The city calls it release. But for many, it's just another transfer from one kind of cage to another. The ferry back to Queens passes a skyline, shining, untouchable, oblivious. Behind you, the island fades. But in your mind, it never does. You can leave Rikers, but Rikers never leaves you. The family is left behind. For every inmate trapped inside Rikers Island, there's someone waiting on the outside. A mother sitting by the phone. A sister checking the mail. A child asking when daddy's coming home. They live in a kind of purgatory, halfway between hope and grief. Days without updates. Weeks without visits. Sometimes the only news comes from a newspaper headline or a coroner's report. Families often spend their savings just to stay connected, paying for collect calls, legal fees, or commissary money so their loved one can eat. Many lose jobs trying to keep up with court dates. Some lose their faith in justice altogether. For them, Rikers is an island. It's a shadow that follows them long after their loved one walks free. And every time another scandal hits the news, they relive it. Every death, every abuse, every lie. It all comes flooding back. Some of these families have turned their pain into purpose. They march, they testify, they organize. They keep the names of the forgotten alive. Because if they don't, no one will. These are the mothers of Rikers, the daughters, the brothers. They are the ones holding the city accountable. One protest, one courtroom, one tear at a time. The promise of reform. In 2027, the city set a deadline, the official closure of Rikers Island. The plan: replace the decaying complex with smaller, humane facilities closer to the boroughs. It was called justice reform. But behind the speeches and blueprints, cracks began to form. Budgets ballooned. Timelines shifted. Local communities opposed new jails being built near their neighborhoods. And the same officials who promised change quietly extended the deadline. As of now, the island still stands. Its towers still cast shadows over the East River. And those same ferries still carry new inmates across the water every morning. So the question isn't when Rikers will close. It's whether we'll let it die or just rename it. Because a system built on punishment doesn't vanish when the buildings do. It just relocates. And the same cycle begins again, behind a different name, under the same sky. The island that never lets go. Stand on the shoreline of the Bronx at dawn, and you can see Rikers through the mist. Concrete rising from the water, like a scar the city can't heal. It looks peaceful from afar, but up close, you can still hear it breathe. Those walls remember every scream, every broken promise, every life cut short. And though politicians change and headlines fade, the truth remains. Rikers Island was never just a jail. It was a reflection of what happens when a society chooses punishment over compassion, control over care, silence over truth. Maybe one day, the gates will finally close. Maybe the ferries will stop running. But the stories, the real stories, will live on, in the memories of those who survived, and in the voices of those who refuse to forget. Because some prisons aren't made of concrete. Some are built in the mind, and some are built by the system itself. This is Rikers Island, the place the city tried to hide, the place the world can no longer ignore. Cinematic, haunting, and reflective. When the sun sets over New York City, its glow barely reaches Rikers Island. The skyline shimmers, glass and steel, but across the water, time stands still. It's as if the city forgot that this place ever existed, or maybe it simply chose to. Every brick on that island carries a story. Some told, most buried. Guards who lost their humanity. Inmates who lost their sanity. Families who lost someone they'll never get back. Rikers wasn't just a facility. It was a mirror, a reflection of everything the system didn't want us to see. We call it correction. But how do you correct what's built on injustice? How do you heal a place that was never meant to heal anyone? You can shut down the buildings. You can erase the name. But the ghosts remain. They live in the silence of empty cells and in the echoes of those who never made a home. Somewhere right now, a new inmate is stepping off that ferry. Somewhere, another mother is waiting for a phone call that may never come. And the island, patient, unfeeling, takes another breath. Rikers Island isn't just a place. It's a warning, a monument to everything that happens when a society turns its back on its own. And if we look away again, we will build another Rikers. Somewhere else. Different name. Same story. This isn't just about Rikers Island. It's about us and what we choose to remember or forget. Thank you for watching. If you believe stories like this deserve to be told, like, share, and subscribe, because the truth deserves a voice. Even when it comes from the darkest places, clean and emotional, Rikers Island isn't just a jail. It's a warning, a reminder of what happens when justice turns cold and humanity gets locked away. If you believe these stories need to be told, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps shine light on the places the world tries to forget. This was the dark secrets of Rikers Island, exposed. Thank you for watching. And remember, the truth never stays buried forever.